Ah, the Citadel. If Eden Prime in the prologue was this highly focused tutorial type mission that got the player acquainted with the world, but not intimate with the world, the Citadel expands on all of that. This is the galactic capital, and it feels like that when you arrive. The sights, the sounds, the grandeur, and I know every time I play this game, when Joker pilots a Normandy onto the Citadel, my senses are flooded and I'm overwhelmed. In a good way. I mean, I'm like, oh my god, look at those blue aliens! Look at those! Look at those little squat little banker dudes! Look at that giant statue! What are the Krogan rebellions? Oh my god, this is so amazing! Wow, like, look at the Presidium! Yeah, it's nonstop fanboying and gushing from me. And the level deserves it. I can't give enough credit to the Citadel for how it amplifies the world to such an extent that you feel like you're a part of it. It is such an incredible magic trick, and it's one of the reasons why I love Mass Effect. But, as fans of the games know, the Citadel houses a deep, dark secret. And I don't know what's worse, that the Citadel is secretly a Reaper hangout where they gather to exterminate all of galactic civilizations, or that the Citadel level actually isn't all that fun. Well, I guess that's the point of these, so here we go. This is my level review on the Citadel. Spoilers for the entire Mass Effect series. During this playthrough, this mission took me 4 hours and 16 minutes. Over half my time was spent in conversations. I spent 2 hours and 9 minutes talking up the denizens of the Citadel, and this is mostly a good thing, because the vast majority of the conversations continue to be great. Usually these ones deal with the main story or the lore and exposition, but there is some clunkiness. All the side quests involve conversations, and too many of these feel very generic, so it puts a little damper on the conversations. The Codex took up 32 minutes and 6 seconds of my time. Again, I love the Codex. This is a smaller percentage of the time than what we spent on Eden Prime, but still, good reading. Cutscenes. After that initial amazing cutscene as we arrive on the Citadel, there's very little of it. So, just 2 minutes and 35 seconds, which is about 1% of the entire mission. But damn, what a cutscene. Walking around. I spent 84 minutes and 6 seconds walking around the Citadel. Walking around, jogging around, running around, it's all the same. I joked in my last video that this is what you kind of do in a video game. Well, the walking, running, jogging here just grates on my nerves. So much of it, so much of it, so much of it. And yes, I said that 3 times because it's so damn repetitive, especially in the second half of the mission. And then combat. Combat's sort of just thrown in here, almost like, hey, this is still a mechanic we have in the game, so here you go with a couple quick combat situations. 8 minutes and 14 seconds, not much. Some of these are good, some of these are average, but they don't really stick out. They're just there to break up the conversations and the exploration. But enough statistics, let's talk world building. This level has a ton of work to do, dumping a whole shit ton of lore on top of you. I think you meet 8 new races on the Citadel. But what's incredible is how smoothly it's all done. It never feels like the game stops everything in its tracks just so it can explain something. Sure, you've got some of those Avena kiosks, which are exposition dumps, but those feel really natural. And that's the thing, everything about this feels so damn natural. The first races you can meet are the Elcor and the Volus, and these guys are not big players on the galactic stage, but they're a really easy way to get to know some of the new races because everything with them is so lighthearted. The Volus look like these squat little nerds, and the Elcor's speech patterns are absolutely hilarious.
Chastising rebuke, Dan. Anxious request. Please, human. Startled realization. I must speak with the consort.
During this conversation, the Volus ambassador keeps on chastising Shepard and humanity for essentially overstepping their bounds by pushing aggressively to get a council seat so soon. Now, taking one look at the Volus, they don't garner much respect from their appearance. But I think it's nice connective tissue from the prologue where Nihilus spoke about how some of the races viewed humanity as moving too quickly, And here we see it from another side. We see a race that feels it should be held in higher esteem than humanity, but instead it's relegated to the background. And this all just continues to set the stage for where humanity stands in the galaxy. The other thing that happens in this embassy is you start hearing about the Asari consort. The way all the characters talk about the consort, you get this sense that she's this almost all-powerful individual who's a very prominent figure on the Citadel. Now, I think it's intentional that the characters continuously say the Asari consort, because I think that's the writers subtly telling us that the Asari are an incredibly important race. And then again, it's no accident that when you walk out of the embassies, the first character you can talk to is an Asari, the receptionist. And that Avina, the VI tour guide, is also an Asari. I'm realizing now just how intelligently this is designed. It's shorthand for communicating to us how the other races perceive the Asari. The Asari have placed themselves in the galaxy as sort of the cultural elite. And that comes into play how they are handled here on the Citadel. They are the elites. They are everywhere. They give off the vibe that they run the Citadel. And the thing is, none of this is actually explained through exposition. This is all through environmental storytelling and just the way the level is built. And I think that's phenomenal work by Bioware. The other major council race that you're introduced to here are the Solarians. Now, you see a few of them wandering around the Presidium, but you don't actually talk to any of them. The first one you actually talk to is going to be the counselor in the Citadel Tower. And I think this is, again, Bioware using a little bit of shorthand to communicate the fundamental base of these races. The Solarians are the espionage-heavy race in the Citadel Council. They're the guys who strike from the shadows. So you not talking to any of them until you meet with the council and start heading down to the wards sort of tells you that these guys are a little bit more secretive than the Asari. Just a really nice, natural introduction to this race. Now, the Krogan, you don't meet any Krogan while on the Presidium, and you probably don't really even notice any until you get all the way down to the lower wards. But the game does a really good job by having these VI terminals all around the Presidium that help explain these concepts that broaden our knowledge of the world, so that when we do go and meet Rex later in the mission, we're kind of unnerved because we now know that the Krogan are a kind of terrifying race that hunted another race down to extinction. We also meet the Hanar, which, man, these guys are pretty much the biggest douchebags on the Citadel. I mean, the Protheans uplifted them, and I'm sure as soon as they did, the Protheans were like, oh my god, why'd we uplift these motherfuckers?
The words this unworthy one speaks are merely observations of the truth. This one humbly submits that it is not preaching to state the truth of the Enkindlers.
I mean, these guys keep preaching about the Protheans, but anyone who talks to them wouldn't want shit to do with the Protheans. But they serve the purpose of keeping the Protheans on the player's mind. The Protheans are one of the fundamental aspects of the main plot, and it's important that the Protheans don't get lost in the shuffle as you're walking around the Citadel. And then finally we meet Tali, a Quarian. Now, we don't learn a whole lot about the Quarians here, and it's probably the most unnatural bit of exposition, where Tali's explaining to Udina and Anderson what she found about Saren, and Shepard interrupts to basically be like, ooh, a pilgrimage, what's that? But I think it's, again, just really nice natural world building that you don't see any Quarians, you don't hear about Quarians at all, so when Dr. Michelle starts mentioning a Quarian and you spot one, she seems out of place because she is out of place, and that's precisely how the Quarians are treated in the galaxy. Just good stuff. Now, the Keepers. I'm not going to talk too much about the Keepers. We know that they're actually agents of the Reapers, but I do want to talk about how this level handles foreshadowing. Basically, I think they do a bang-up job of foreshadowing events. The Rachni Wars are discussed in depth by the Avina kiosk next to the Krogan statue. It seems like really interesting and deep lore that you're learning, but when you're hearing it for the first time, you don't actually think, okay, this is going to be important going forward. It seems more like contextual background information. And same with the conversation about the Keepers, the Citadel Tower, and the Relay Monument with the other Avina kiosk. Maybe I'm just naive and dense as hell, but I didn't really think, okay, the Keepers are going to be the secret heralds of the apocalypse. I just thought, hey, there are these bug-like creatures, and just like the in-game characters start to ignore them, I started to ignore them. It was great lore hearing about him from Avina, but I didn't really think about him twice after this. I think it's just great how they set this up with all the foreshadowing. But enough about foreshadowing and the future, let's talk about the present and the main plot. Eden Prime did a great job of setting up the main plot and giving it a sense of urgency. We'd already seen what Saren and the Geth had done. We'd seen the giant eldritch abomination squid-looking flying spaceship monstrosity thing. And we know the stakes. I mean, we're video game players. We know that the stakes are going to be epic. We may not know exactly what's going to happen, but we have a sense. So it's incredibly frustrating when you get on the Citadel and Shepard immediately gets stonewalled. But it kind of makes sense. Like, why would this council of intergalactic alien species believe a human over one of their own trusted agents? Especially when most of the evidence is, I had a vision. It's such good writing because this is not just a plot about Shepard versus Saren and the Geth. It's also a plot about humanity earning its stripes in the galaxy. And the game doesn't let you forget that. So Shepard and friends confer amongst one another and figure out that they need to gather evidence against Saren. And this is where the main plot kind of lacks. I mean, we meet Garrus, we meet Rex, we meet Tali. All are iconic characters. But I'm not a fan of how the story itself is handled here. It's very point A to point B, and the entire investigation could be over in 20 minutes if you rush it. And I know that the main plot is a little bit more open-ended here, as in you can go a couple different paths to get to the end destination. But I just think that they sort of fundamentally undermine their biggest strengths, which is conversations, dialogue, and intrigue. You're told to team up with Garrus, who's investigating Saren, and Garrus basically does the entire investigation before you meet up with him. When you meet up with him, he's just like, okay, Fist, the Shadow Broker, Saren, they're all involved. We need to go to Fist's place and let's pick up Rex. And you do so, and then you go there and there's a big firefight. But I would have preferred Fist to be a major character in the game, someone you have multiple conversations with and have to maybe work for him, with him, against him, to try and squeeze the information you need out of him. But instead, you just confront him and he tells you exactly what you want to know, and then Rex kills him if he's in your party. You know, it sounds really interesting, but it's just not very effective because the plot points don't feel earned. It all feels very gamey. Like, just like I said about Fist, I would have liked to have interacted with several characters involved with the Shadow Broker and had a situation where I didn't know if I was being directed the right way, the wrong way, if someone was going to stab me in the back. Like, I would have preferred Bioware add maybe 2 hours to the main plot in this level rather than slam us with all the side quests. I think this is around the point in the game where most players, and by most players I mean myself, do all the side quests, and the mission sort of just grinds to a halt. Mechanically, there's nothing interesting here. There's no unique gameplay elements, there's no memorable set pieces, and so you just end up feeling like you're running around back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, doing a bunch of middling tasks for some of the most uninteresting personalities in the galaxy. Now, I just complained about how the side quests sort of take away from the effectiveness of the main plot in this portion of the game, but isn't that kind of a staple of all RPGs? Like, the main plot sort of gets diluted at one point when the game opens up, and then you go and explore all the side content. Well, the key to making that work is the side content has to be interesting, and goddamn, I just don't think it's very interesting in Mass Effect. They all just feel really generic, like they could have come from any other game, and that they don't necessarily add anything to the Mass Effect universe. For example, the Consort. Man, I have so much shit to talk about with the Consort. She is talked up so much at the beginning of the level. You're led to believe that she runs this mystical establishment that is going to serve some grander purpose to either Shepard or the larger narrative. I mean, just listen to how important Bioware seems to think this character is when she's walking around by herself out of sight of everyone. But then the side quest around her is just about a Turian general who's in love with her and was rejected and is spreading rumors about her. That's it. There's no world building there. That's just stuff's happening between two different characters. And yeah, some people might think that's interesting, and the quest isn't terrible, but what does this actually tell us about the Mass Effect universe? That these aliens act like humans? Yeah, that's, I guess, something, but the way they talked up the consort, I was hoping for more. Oh wait, you do get more, and it is unpleasant. But I will talk about that later. The other side quests don't piss me off as much, but they still lack in terms of what you actually learn about the universe. You've got Emily Wong, who wants to track down corruption on the Citadel. Now, this could have been really interesting. You could have really gotten creative with trying to figure out some unique and extravagantly alien types of corruption that you could have going down on the Citadel. But instead, all you do is you find a data pad or something and hand it to Emily Wong, and that's it. You don't actually learn what the corruption was. And this is just a running pattern with the side quests. You've got the sisters, one of them who's a CSEC undercover agent, and then you proceed to learn nothing about anything. This is just a generic undercover story where one person thinks another is in over their head and wants to get them out, and then you have to help out the handler, and the handler wants you to meet up with a Krogan and do a illicit arms deal for some mods. Why didn't they maybe put a little bit of effort into, I don't know, talking about the kind of mods that are being traded on the black market on the Citadel? That could have been some interesting lore, but you don't get any of that. Really, the only side quests in this mission that actually add to the lore are the Hanar Prophet, as we learn about their worship of the Protheans, and Samir Bhattacharya's ordeal with trying to get his wife back from the Alliance. At least that quest talks a little bit about how humanity's trying to deal with the threat of the Geth. I always knew that I didn't find these side quests super engaging, but on this playthrough I realized that they are just fundamentally lacking what I love about Mass Effect. So with the middling side quests out of the way, we're free to finish up the main quest, and it's not particularly lengthy, but there's some big-time revelations and events that occur here.
Eden Prime was a major victory. The beacon has brought us one step closer to finding the conduit.
And one step closer to the return of the Reapers.
It's not a novel idea to have this apocalyptic threat to all of existence be the overarching nemesis in a game, especially an RPG. It's basically the plot of every RPG, but what I like here is that it's revealed so early on, but a lot of the drama is derived from the fact that the people in power, the council, don't believe Shepard or Anderson about the Reapers. They believe them about Saren and the Geth, but they're not willing to act on the Reapers. And I think that's a nice little wrinkle to things. We also get Shepard being inaugurated into the Spectres, which is a chill-inducing sequence.
Spectres are not trained, but chosen. Individuals forged in the fire of service and battle. Those whose actions elevate them above the rank and file.
Spectres are an ideal, a symbol, the embodiment of courage, determination, and self-reliance. They are the right hand of the Council, instruments of our will.
Spectres bear a great burden. They are protectors of galactic peace, both our first and last line of defense. The safety of the galaxy is theirs to uphold.
You are the first human Spectre, Commander. This is a great accomplishment for you and your entire species.
I'm honored, Counselor.
And then we get Anderson being unceremoniously dumped as the captain of the Normandy by Udina so that Shepard can take control of the ship. And then we get the great speech aboard the Normandy, which isn't really super story-based, but it's just a way to get your blood pumping as you move on to the next phase of the main story. And it's a way for us to forget about Kaidan because they, for some reason, couldn't find the time or space to have Kaidan in this scene. Speaking of not caring about Kaidan, let's dive into the characters. Probably an unpopular opinion, and one that I didn't even hold like a week ago. I don't think Mass Effect is super good at character development. Now that's not to say that there aren't great characters. I love most of the party members and peripheral characters, but so much of the development is done during the sequences on the Normandy, and realizing that, man, it would have been so much better if these characters had some more contextual dialogue. Like, there's a bit in this level where Shepard, Ashley, and Kaidan arrive in the wards, and they're looking out at the ward arms and are all basically in awe at what they are seeing. And there's some really good character development here with just them reacting to this really unfamiliar scene for them. But unfortunately, that's really all you get. I mean, Garrus, Rex, and Tali get some minimal character development just when you run into them. Garrus gives some token dialogue about how the red tape has been holding him back at CSEC and he wants to take down Saren. Rex is a bounty hunter, so you know that his moral compass is probably not facing true north.
What are you doing?
The Shadow Broker paid me to kill him. I don't leave jobs half done.
I am in charge here. You ever pull another stunt like that?
It was the only contract I had left. And don't we have something more pressing to worry about?
Why, yes, Rex. Yes, we do. We gotta talk about Tali. Actually, no, Tali doesn't really get any development at all. She tells us she's on her pilgrimage, and she gets annoyed at this Turian asshole who gets handsy with her. But Tali doesn't get any character development, really. At least the other major characters get good character beats throughout the mission. Udina is not super deep, but he's just a slimy politician, and he plays it really well. Anderson, I talk about him throughout this video. I don't need to go into too much more depth about him, but I love him as a father figure, and I love his complex layers. Saren is so deliciously malevolent during the council briefing when his arrogance is just pouring out of the hologram, and I just want to punch him in that mandibled face of his. Like, you know that he's guilty, and he's doing such a good job of just throwing shade at Shepard, and it's infuriating, and it's amazing. And now we get to Clinster Shepard. And Shepard's character arc is completely dependent on the decisions you make in this game. There isn't much of an arc without them, and the main plot is kind of barren of these choices in this level. However, as I mentioned in the last video, I'm playing my Shepard as a human-first, curious individual, and that curiosity does come into play in some of the side quests, which do give you choices. Most notably, she chooses to side with the insufferable douchebag that is the Hanar religious prophet, solely because she believes in knowledge and doesn't believe in censoring, no matter how much she'd probably want to kill that stupid jelly. She also kind of belittles Samir Bhatia about his wife's body being held up by the Alliance. She sides with the Alliance because she thinks, okay, we do need this information on how to combat Geth weaponry. Unfortunately, I had not leveled up my charm skill enough to this point. I only had my intimidate skill up. So she intimidated this poor widow, and it's really hard to watch. Like, why is she screaming at him? And then in a typical problem that Mass Effect has, Samir Bhatia sort of reacts angrily and then inexplicably thanks Shepard for showing him the error of his ways. I hate when they paint Shepard like this. I'd rather some characters just be like, I really don't like you, but that is not to be. There are a couple more examples, but they're similarly small scale. But I do want to talk about the one moment where I felt like my decision making was taken away from me. So they've been talking about this stupid fucking Asari consort all mission long. And when you finally solve her stupid-ass side quest about her stupid-ass Turian suitor, she just sort of gives you a gift of knowledge and spouts out your character's background. So naturally, my Shepard asked, is that it? Thinking that it would be something like, really? That's all the information you've got? You're a consort. Everyone's been talking about you like you're a prophet. And then for some reason, that led to them having sex? Like, what the hell? What the hell, game? And it's all even more annoying that when I was trying to ask, is that all you're gonna give me? She instead says, thanks, I guess. And then the consort starts stroking Shepard's face, and there's no option to be like, what the hell are you doing? Or get your hand off of me. Nope. They just fornicate the night away. This is just so frustrating. This is one of those cases where it feels like Bioware just takes control away from the player to give them what they think the player wants, and it just feels so out of sync with what my character was going for, so whatever. Well, one way for me to dull the pain is to talk about stats and how often the different pieces of lore are mentioned. Just like last time, my disclaimer is that a lot of these numbers are probably off. I literally am recording my gameplay and watching it and frantically putting numbers into a spreadsheet as I hear stuff. So even though this channel is Pointless Rewind, I find rewinding over and over through each of my playthroughs to be a bit too pointless. So here we go. Let's start with the races. At number 1, we've got humanity with 58 mentions. Not a surprise again. As much as Mass Effect is about the entire universe and all these alien species, it's a human-centric story, and this mission continues that, as it's all about humanity trying to prove Saren's guilt and about Shepard becoming the first human Spectre. So humans come in at number 1. Number 2 is a big surprise to me, and that's because the Geth somehow get mentioned 27 times, and you don't fight any Geth in this mission. You don't see any of them. But we get repeated references to Saren's army of Geth, and we learn that the Geth worship the Reapers. So they are still very present in the story. Number 3 is even more surprising. We got the Turians again, 22 mentions. I built my entire review on the fact that the prologue focused so much on Turians, thinking that, yeah, the Turians are not going to be center stage in the Citadel. And I still don't think they are. They just get mentioned a lot, and it's probably because Saren is a Turian, and he's the main antagonist. Coming in at number 4, and as an even bigger surprise, the Protheans. Like, what the hell is going on here? 21 mentions. I just had a section in my review talking about how the Hanar side quest is there so that you don't forget about the Protheans, but they're mentioned a whole lot. The word Prothean gets thrown in multiple times when we were talking about the beacon, the conduit, the relay statue. All these little things, they add up. But again, I didn't realize it got mentioned so much, but kudos to the writers for keeping the Protheans so prevalent. And rounding out the top 5 are the Krogan with 19 mentions. This is not that surprising, except it's surprising that they're higher than the Asari and the Solarians. But whatever, I'm done talking about surprises. I want something nice and predictable. So let's talk about the locations then. Coming in at number 1 with 53 mentions is the Citadel and Citadel Space. Wow, what a shock. A level on the Citadel mentions the Citadel more than any other location. Number 2, we got Eden Prime, 18 mentions. I guess the attack on Eden Prime is still the driving event that is propelling the story forward. So a lot of characters make mention about what happened on Eden Prime. So number 2. Tied at number 3 are the Presidium and the Wards with 11 mentions each. And at number 5 is the Citadel Tower with 9 mentions. These are the major landmarks, locations in the Citadel that you visit, so a lot of characters talk about them. The Wards are probably talked about a bit too much. Too many characters sit there saying stupid things like, oh man, the Wards, there's a lot of stuff happening down there and it's so unpredictable, but it's a lot of fun down there. And then you go down there and it's like, okay, that general's a Turian and he's in love with an Asari. Yeah, that's fascinating. And after the craziness that is the Wards, we've got the Attican Traverse. Basically, this level continues to sort of crystallize that the entire game basically is occurring in the Attican Traverse. So we learn a little bit more about it, that we're supposed to hunt down Saren in the Traverse, and that humanity has been expanding towards the fringes of the Attican Traverse, and not all the alien races like that. But let's move on to the characters. To the surprise of no one, Saren comes in at number 1 with 77 mentions. The entire plot of this level is about finding evidence against Saren and proving his guilt, and then it's about sending Shepard off to hunt down Saren. And we learn some background with his undermining Anderson's attempts at becoming the first human Spectre. And then in the upset of the century, coming in at number 2, the Consort beats out Shepard. She gets 22 mentions, and good God, if there's any character in this game that didn't deserve being mentioned this often, it's the Consort. So number 3, in a tie, is Shepard and Fist. Here's the thing about Fist. Very similar to the Asari Consort, they talk him up so much. He's this major player in the underground at the Wards. He's basically a criminal mastermind or something like that. So why couldn't there have been a couple more quests involving him? Maybe where you have to work for him or against him and have to actually engage in conversations with him. But nope, a lot of mentions for nothing. And then tied at number 5 with 16 mentions are Captain Anderson and the Shadow Broker. The Shadow Broker is so shadowy that I just have clips of Garrus and Dr. Michelle. Captain Anderson probably gets the best character development in this level, and I just love the character. He's so complicated and biased and compromised, as in Udina bringing him to the council hearing was a gigantic mistake, and I just wish more of the characters were developed like Captain Anderson. And let's finish up with the factions. Number 1 is the council. The council is the central governing body for all of Citadel politics. Everything about the main plot is about presenting evidence to them and getting their endorsement for going after Saren, and it's them who crown Shepard a Spectre. So, number 1 with 78 mentions. Number 2 are the Spectres. Well, this mission's about taking down a rogue Spectre, and we get lots of juicy lore about how Anderson was going to be the first human Spectre, and Shepard does become the first human Spectre, so lots of Spectrin. Number 3 is CSEC with 39 mentions. CSEC is not a very interesting faction, other than my boy Garrus was a member of CSEC, but they're mentioned a whole lot because they're the police officers of the Citadel. And at number 4 is the Alliance with 22 mentions. I think the Alliance is going to be a mainstay on these lists, as they are basically a representation of humanity as a whole. And that wraps up the lore. So let's talk gameplay, and let's start with the conversation system. I was a bit surprised. I thought that there were a lot more story-based decisions early on in this game, but analyzing it at this level, I've come to realize that they hold off on these major decisions until later in the game. You do get to make a few decisions in the dialogue here. You get to dabble with the charm and intimidate systems a little bit, but I'm pretty sure they were all relegated to the side quests. None of them were in the main quest, and I guess it kind of makes sense. This is the first level after the tutorial/prologue, so maybe Bioware was concerned about introducing too many catastrophic choices this early on. So the choices you're left with are just sort of these side quest choices, which really amount to just picking one side or the other. They don't really impact anything. The problem with a lot of these choices is that it feels like Bioware put them in here so that you could mold your Shepard into having the personality you want them to have, but the choices end up feeling both arbitrary and extreme. Like the quest for Rita and Jenna. Rita tells you that Jenna is working undercover at Cora's den and that she's worried about her, so Shepard goes over to talk to her, and there's no option to be like, I support this. I'm playing as a female Shepard. I want to be able to embrace and endorse Jenna's autonomy here, but instead, you say condescending things like, this isn't a game, Jenna. This is dangerous, or stupid shit like that. But then you keep going through the quest and you meet the Turian handler, and then he says, hey, we got this undercover buy going on. Go and do this, please, blah, blah, blah. So you go to do the undercover buy with this Krogan black market salesman, and you can inexplicably undermine the sale by yelling out, you're under arrest, and erupting into a firefight. So Shepard is concerned about Jenna's safety, but then is willing to go vigilante cop all over the situation. It's just too all over the place sometimes. Rather than give you some meaningful smaller choices that allow you to move a conversation the way you would in real life, like, say, not condescending towards Jenna and saying, hey, I respect that you're putting your life in danger here and good luck, or smacking away the Asari consort's hand when she starts stroking your face. No, the game doesn't give you those options. The game just moves you into these binary choices where you can click one option and suddenly be in a firefight in the wards because you just wanted to make the arrest yourself, or you could be having sex with the Asari consort. It's too big and not small enough. Now, with all that complaining aside, I gotta say I still love the writing in general. When the dialogue's really going, it can build this great sense of momentum. Basically, every conversation you have in the main quest is absolutely riveting. Talking to the council and trying to prove Saren's guilt, that shit is compelling as hell. The music is pounding, and there's a sense of urgency and stakes that just, I don't know, you gotta play it to really experience it. And Mass Effect has one of the most driving narratives I can think of in an RPG. And despite the game and this level being so lore heavy, none of the conversations end up feeling boring or like you're being just explained stuff to. I mean, the conversations with Tally sometimes drift towards that when you start asking her about the pilgrimage, and there's the occasional bit like when you're talking to the Volus shopkeep and he just randomly decides, hey, let me talk to you about Pharos and Novaria really awkwardly, and lo and behold, those are 2 of your next missions. But those are little minor blips. The dialogue throughout the rest of the level is really natural. The only time exposition really becomes heavy is when you're talking to the Avena kiosks. But hey, those are kiosks that give you basically tourist information, so that makes sense. Everywhere else, it just feels really natural, and it helps to make the world feel like a more compelling place. And I think that strength is really highlighted on this level. Now, exploration. I'll say that the first hour or so on the Citadel is absolutely masterful work by Bioware at letting the level design pull the player along naturally so that they learn the world in a sort of orderly fashion. Like right from the start, when you leave the human embassy, your objective marker is to the left, but most players probably go right because they want to explore everything. So you meet the Elcor and the Volus, and then you learn a bit more about how some of the races view humans not very highly. And then you head out into the Presidium, and again, the objective marker is pointing you to the right, but you probably head left, which means you circle all the way around. So you'll hit up the Asari Consort and its incredibly underwhelming clientele. Then you hit up some of the shops, you meet Hanar, and you head around and you're hitting up all these Avena kiosks. So you learn about the Council, you learn about the Krogan Rebellions and the Rachni, and then you learn about the Citadel Tower and the Keepers. And all these bits are not essential. Like, you could beat the game and you would not have lost much by not hearing about the stuff, but just the way the game sort of subtly tugs you in these directions, it allows them to foreshadow events and to lay out the important lore for the player to find. Once you're given your primary mission of tracking down evidence against Saren, you head down to the wards, and this area is pretty beautiful upon first entry, which is what Caden and Ashley comment on. But unfortunately, this is where it sort of gets scatterbrained, because this is where you start getting loads and loads of side quests, and you can go in any which direction, and the area ends up feeling just very small. Like, they talk about these wards as being gigantic mini cities, but you run around a bit and they're really small. And I guess this is kind of the problem with these pre-open world hub areas. Like, Mass Effect was before, or actually it was actually right after Oblivion came out, but open world games weren't super prevalent. And so this was like a sizable hub world, and it was impressive at the time, but it feels both limiting and then exhausting when you have to run around repeatedly because there's so little to actually do. So basically, I think exploration is handled really well for the first hour, but then just sort of crumbles beneath the weight of all the exhausting trekking back and forth. The music in this level is great, particularly when you're on the Presidium. There's this really nice mix of awe and grandeur mixed with dark and foreboding. Like, when you're running around, it feels nice and light and fluffy, just like the way the Presidium is supposed to convey to the player. But there's this real sense of menace underneath the hopeful notes that I think foreshadow the eventual reveals about the Citadel. The only problem with the music, though, is that because of all the running around, it gets very repetitive. So even though I love this music, it's not a track that I think fondly about. One thing that doesn't feel repetitive in this level is the combat, and that's mostly because it feels like Bioware kind of forgot about it. I'm kind of joking, but this level is so exploration and conversation based. Combat feels like an afterthought, which, you know, knowing the combat in Mass Effect, it's not a problem, but it just feels weirdly unbalanced. Like, all of the combat is essentially concentrated on the main quest in the investigation portion. You got a couple of assassins that assail you outside of Korra's den, and this is an RPG trope when assassins ambush the party characters, but I don't know, in games like Baldur's Gate, it feels like important to the story. Here, it just feels like, oh crap, we needed a combat situation, here we go, and it adds nothing. There is one really good set piece in this mission, and it's the fight in Korra's den. I do like the vibe of fighting through this seedy nightclub, and the fight back out has got a timer, kind of like in Eden Prime, and again, I've never actually come close to having this timer run out on me, so it's not really that tense, but it's a good set piece. And then you got a quick fight when you're rescuing Tally, None of these fights stand out from a mechanical standpoint. Nothing new is really introduced. Yeah, you fight a couple of new guys, like some of the assassins are Turians, but they don't feel any different than anyone else. You fight a couple of Krogan, and I think the Krogan can charge at you in this game. I know they definitely do in Mass Effect 2, but in my playthrough, the Krogan never stayed alive long enough to do so. I thought it was interesting that during the fight to save Tali, there's a couple of these weird guys wearing white that look kind of like the robots or automated defense systems in Mass Effect 2. Like, do we ever fight these guys again in Mass Effect? But yeah, combat is an afterthought in this level, and honestly, I'm shocked that I'm saying this about Mass Effect 1, but the level probably could have used a little bit more. In the end, I give the Citadel a 74 out of 100. The Citadel is one of the most memorable locations I've ever interacted with in any video game. I'm still constantly amazed by how incredibly the lore is conveyed to the player. This is some of the best world building you'll ever see anywhere, and the level deserves praise for that. Unfortunately, gameplay is where this level falls flat. Mass Effect commonly has issues with the combat, but that's not where this level struggles. No, it struggles with its side quests. There's just too many of them. They take up way too much time during the middle of the level, and it kind of drags down the pacing. And very few of them have any sort of compelling hook, interesting gameplay mechanics, or satisfying conclusions. Despite how much I love the world building and can appreciate the revelations in the main plot, the gameplay just isn't very fun. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, stay tuned because I'm going to be releasing more Mass Effect videos as I go through the rest of the levels. And please like this video and subscribe.